Welcome to a new daily top Askreddit video. Today's topic:
who is the worst traitor in human history? Campbells at Glencoe were pretty despicable. Edit for reference, the Glencoe Massacre, 1692, was a brutal episode in Scottish history where government soldiers, many from Clan Campbell, under orders from King William III, killed 38 members of Clan MacDonald of Glencoe. The MacDonalds had delayed swearing allegiance to the king after the Glorious Revolution, and this was used as a pretext for punishment. The most infamous part was that the Campbell soldiers had been living as guests among the MacDonalds for nearly 2 weeks, sharing food and shelter, before turning on them in the early morning hours. It wasn't just a massacre, it was a betrayal, seen as a chilling example of state-sanctioned violence and clan politics. The event left a lasting scar and symbolized the deep mistrust between Highland clans and the central government. Quote, one of the historical inspirations George R.R. Martin used for the Red Wedding. The Black Dinner too. There's an old tradition that if you have a Campbell to dinner, the table isn't set with knives. Is this why they make soup? I'm in Australia, and a friend of the family immigrated from Scotland in the late 60s. Something about somebody called Campbell came up in conversation one time. He just immediately launched into this "ye cannae trust a Campbell" rant. It was hilarious. Whoever invented the skip ad button but made it appear after you've already watched the full ad. I have more anger for Facebook ads over videos. The X button is ridiculously tiny, and sometimes it moves right when I'm about to press it, so I end up opening up the ad anyway. Absolutely diabolical. I don't really use Facebook, but I know what you mean, as many mobile app games have those tiny XS when they play their ads. So damn annoying. Half the time I open up the shitty ad too. Corfitz Ulfet is not well known outside of Scandinavia, but very bad. In a quick recap, he was in a top position under the Danish king in the mid-1600s, but did a bunch of corrupt stuff, allegedly, and fled to Sweden, who had been the mortal enemies of Denmark for hundreds of years. Here he started working for the Swedish king and didn't just tell him every Danish secret he knew, but deliberate did everything he could to enrage the Swedes against the Danes, so they would declare them war. After a few years he succeeded, and he didn't just help the Swedish troops from the front lines, again with a bunch of important information about the Danish army and the landscape, he also let the Swedish king borrow insane amounts of money from him that he had stolen from the Danish treasury. Money that was then used to buy mercenaries for the invasion. The Swedes won, and Ulfelt got his own lands back and even a Danish island for his troubles. But it wasn't long before the Swedish king also started being annoyed with Ulfelt, who now fled back to Denmark, where he was arrested. For some insane reason he was eventually allowed to leave the country because he said he needed to go to a spa for his health. Of course he didn't go to a spa and fled Denmark once again. This time he went to a bunch of different kings in Europe and tried to get them in on his crazy schemes essentially. He also gave the skull of one of the biggest Danish saints to the French, another thing he had stolen. He even tried to arrange a coup of the Danish throne, but without luck. The Danes never got him again, but his wife was famously imprisoned in a tower for 22 years, essentially in her husband's place. Ulfelt was so hated in Denmark that a statue of shame was erected for him that people were supposed to spit on as they walked past. It stood in Copenhagen for hundreds of years. Erecting a statue for the specific purpose of being spit on and prolonging hatred towards an individual is so funny to me. Tears of joy. I don't think I've ever heard of that before. We need to bring back the spit statues. Quite a few people deserve them. Ephialtes of Traitors. He allegedly showed the Persians the mountain path so that they could defeat the Spartans at Thermopylae. It's funny how we look at history. We see the Greeks as the good guys because they won and were Westerners. In reality, the Greeks were slave owners, with the Spartans being a bit barbaric, while Persians had outlawed slavery and were socially very progressive. Yet they're remembered as villains because they lost. Edit, upon further research the Persians did in fact have slaves. Turns out my uni professor lied. The fact that they were an invading force primed for conquest probably didn't help either. Well, that and they were the invading force. Humans on the whole rarely look kindly on invaders in retrospect, even if they weren't actually bad people. Was he bribed? Herodotus says he did it for personal gain, unclear if that meant money, titles, or something else. He eventually fled and is tracked down and killed. He was killed by Athenides. He is depicted as the deformed hunchback in 300 in all Greek literature. Quisling was pretty bad. https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/vidcon_Quisling. His name is literally a synonym for traitor in the thesaurus. It says a lot when your name becomes synonymous in the Oxford Dictionary with traitor. I've actually heard the word Quisling used that way, but I had no idea it came from a person's name. Even his first name kind of disappeared post WW2. Robin Hood app. They really should get hit with false advertisement suits, not only for going against it, but for continuing to pretend it didn't happen. I thought the absolute worst of it was how Congress subpoenaed a YouTube personality to pin the blame on and not the hedge funders that were shorting the stock with no security. The irony of being called Robin Hood makes it all the more disgusting. Robin the Hood. Vidkun Quisling, Philippe Pétain, Anton Mussert, Leon Degrelle, Ferenc Szalasi, Joseph Tiso, Ante Pavlik, Milan Nedic, all the people who collaborated with the Nazis against their own countrymen. Pétain is a big one in my book. He's the answer to me. He went from the highest high to the lowest low. These other traitors had big moments, but none went from the guy who literally saved his homeland in its darkest hour to the guy that betrayed it and sold it into servitude. To accomplish that in one lifetime is truly remarkable. Fun fact, his name is still engraved on the sidewalk of New York City at the Canyon of Heroes since he was honored by a 1931 ticker tape parade for his service in WWI. There was some talk about removing it, but nothing has come of that. Truly the embodiment of die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. Donald John Trump. How dare you criticize mein Führer? Kim Philby, the British MI6 agent turned Soviet spy. Philby knew almost everything going on against Eastern European communist countries, things like agents being dropped into various countries who had already been burnt by Philby to the Soviets. Hundreds were executed thanks to him. The UK got its revenge on the USSR with Oleg Gordievsky, the KGB chief resident of the British Embassy who was a double agent for the British for 11 years. God, his story is the stuff of movies. I was so captivated by the book about him. Absolutely this. And because he was a public school old boy, nobody at the top of British intelligence would believe he was a spy. Krasnev hasn't betrayed Russia yet. Rebecca from my 4th grade class. She said she was in love with me but was just lying because she and her friends thought it would be funny. Tarring and feathering is too good for her and people like her. It took years of therapy before I could accept that someone could care about me even a little bit. Edit, thank you everyone so far. I've never felt so vindicated in my hatred for Rebecca. I wish I could show this to 9-year-old me lol. To hell with scummy Rebecca. All my homies hate Rebecca, HJ. Really surprised that I haven't seen anyone mention Brutus yet. I think that's more because Brutus's betrayal was against one man, whereas others, like all the politicians who betrayed their country to the Nazis, betrayed the trust the people put on them. Brutus's betrayal was a massive blow to Julius Caesar, but not for anyone else. It was a massive blow, but to be fair, the other 20 blows were also fairly big. For real, Caesar treated him like a son, but he backstabbed him in the worst possible way and killed him. Literally, his last words were to Brutus, "One man's traitor is another man's patriot." You could argue it the other way and claim that Brutus was an incredibly patriotic Roman who was willing to sacrifice his own father figure in an attempt to save Rome's democracy. Saruman the White betrayed all of Middle-earth. He wasn't human though, he was a Maiar, correct? Essentially a demigod. John Anthony Walker, https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/John_Anthony_Walker. My dad started in signals intelligence as an airman in 1966, did that in uniform for 21.5 years, then another 14 as a civilian executive with 2 or 3 alphabet agencies. He was intimately acquainted with the systems Walker betrayed. More importantly, he was officially read in to the extent of that betrayal. It literally haunted him for the rest of his life. I took care of him in his last months and he told me the amount of damage Walker did was almost impossible to comprehend. Craziest part of this story is that the Soviets had nothing on this guy. He straight up walked into the Soviet embassy in DC during the golden age of espionage and negotiated a salary for himself, all because he was a broke drunk. Former submarine radioman here. This guy fucked us so hard. Our crypto handling procedures completely changed because of this shit stain. The 2-person integrity system was implemented where handling communication crypto requires 2 trusted people so that no single person ever has access to handle it. As for the damage Walker caused, we won't ever know. Russia intercepts and stores our encrypted communication in hopes of breaking the encryption one day. Walker allowed them to break the encryption. This meant Russia probably knew if we were having any troubles and knew how to make those troubles worse. Why would Captain America do that? I might be biased, but Pol Pot. He turned on his own country and brought upon the slaughter of millions of innocent men, women and children. They say he preferred to use hammers on his victims to conserve ammunition. Edit, a word. One of my husband's best friends escaped the killing fields as a child with his family. His description of the experience is unsettling. A good friend of mine married into a family who escaped. Her husband's parents were part of Pol Pot's house staff and their first 6 children were murdered by his regime, yet they were forced to spend the days after losing their children working to serve him and be pleasant to him. He was born very shortly after they escaped to the US, and obviously they don't really talk about it, but the grief his family carries must be crushing. His mom is so kind and gentle. I treasure watching him be a dad, and seeing his beautiful daughter growing up with a big, loving family. I cannot imagine what a gift that little girl must be for her grandparents. I love my friends and I hope they and their children live long, beautiful and safe lives. That rat Judas. I can't believe I had to scroll this far down to find Judas. Dante said the same thing. Seriously, I know everyone is an atheist here, but like, this ought to be a bit higher up, no? Yay, that's crazy. Really famous story of a major world religion.